Hey guys, this type of question is modifiers. And they show up, I don't know, 2, 3 times a test, at least. They're good to know. Once you can spot them, you're going to get them right. So let's get into them. Golden rule with modifiers. Well, let's start with what a modifier is. A modifier describes something, therefore it modifies it. Is it an apple or a red apple or a yellow apple? Red and yellow are modifiers of the word apple. They describe the word apple. 5 types of modifiers that you got to memorize. Adjectives and adverbs, and then 3 types of phrases: prepositional phrases, gerund phrases, and descriptive phrases. Prepositional phrase starts with a preposition. A gerund phrase, well, it's just a phrase starting with a gerund, and we basically just call all the other ones descriptive phrases. It's a whole phrase that describes something. The golden rule with modifiers is that a modifier must go next to what it modifies. So I don't say, I read the apple ate. I say, it ate the red apple. Red has to go next to the word apple because that's the word it's describing. So a modifier must go next to what it modifies or describes. Most of the questions you'll see are probably dangling modifier questions. By the way, so a misplaced modifier and a dangling modifier, those are the 2 types of modifier errors. A misplaced modifier is simply not next to the thing it should be modifying. And let me just scroll through. I'll find you some misplaced modifier questions. It's going to look like number 43 here. It's basically giving you 4 different spots in a sentence that the modifier should go. Whether it's a prepositional phrase, like in 43, we have at once, it's a prepositional phrase. But if it's an adjective or adverb too, it's got to go right next to the word it describes. They give you 4 places in the sentence for the modifier to go, and you just got to put it in the right place, which is next to the thing it's describing. Those are misplaced modifier questions. More common are the dangling modifier questions. A dangling modifier is when the modifier begins a sentence and there's a comma right after it. And the thing that goes right after the comma should be the thing that just got described by the modifier. But in a dangling modifier, it doesn't put the thing that was getting described after the comma. And so that modifier is sort of dangling off the front of the sentence, disconnected from the thing it should be right next to, which is the thing it's describing. And there's a certain rhythm and cadence to dangling modifiers that you're going to start to notice. It's sort of modifier and then comma. And then they want to know, hey, what are you going to put after that comma? Are you going to put the thing that was just getting described or not? So if we look at 48, it says, shortly after performing her first supporting role, comma. So that's it doesn't start with a preposition, doesn't start with a gerund. But it is a long phrase, so we're just going to throw it in the descriptive phrase box. Descriptive phrase starting the sentence. And we got to put after that comma, who or whatever was just getting described. So who or whatever was had just performed her first supporting role, they got to go right after the comma. So we want Wong, the person, right after the comma. And so no change is going to be correct here. And you'll notice that G and H put audiences, but it's the audiences were not performing her first supporting role. It's Wong. So it's got to be either F or J. And J has an incorrect comma after starred. That comma right before the preposition in there without a non-essential clause. So anyway, dangling modifiers. You got a modifier at the start of the sentence and then a comma. And when you start noticing those, you realize, ooh, okay, modifier starting the sentence and then a comma. Okay, probably a dangling modifier question. And you got to make sure that what comes right after the comma is the thing that was just getting described by the modifier that started the sentence. So another one we could look at. Six is a long one. Envisioning a long modifier that starts the sentence. Envisioning a motel that combined the name La Concha, which translates to shell, with the arched roofs typical of Bougie architecture, comma. Gerund phrase that starts the sentence. So whoever was envisioning a motel has to go right after that comma. So it's going to be H, Williams. Williams designed a lobby. Williams was the one envisioning the motel. So his name has to go right after the comma because a modifier goes right next to the thing it describes. Let's find another one. '61. It says suspended under a 23-foot wide canopy of silk, comma. You can tell which of the 5 types of modifiers begins that sentence. It's a descriptive phrase, suspended under a 23-foot wide canopy of silk. If it started with a preposition, it'd be a prepositional phrase. If it started with a gerund, it'd be a gerund phrase. But we got to put the name of the person who was suspended under a 23-foot wide canopy of silk. So it's going to be D, garnering. It's the only one that puts the right thing after the comma, which is whoever was just getting described. So that is it, modifier questions. And you're going to start to recognize the rhythm and cadence of the sentences where it starts with a modifier and then comma. And then you got to put the thing that was just getting described after the comma. And that's dangling modifier questions. And I'll show you kind of an unusual misplaced modifier question, which is here in 35. It says, in reality, only 3 of more than 850 known species of bats feed per mammalian blood. Even those do not draw nourishment from human blood. They bite cattle and horses in their sleep. So I think, as I look at no change, in their sleep is going to be wrong there. Because it's actually, let's go through the answers. That in their sleep, that prepositional phrase might be in the wrong place. Although it looks right. Let's look at B. They bite sleeping cattle and horses. That sounds good. They bite cattle and horses when they are asleep. While asleep, they bite cattle and horses. I think it's the cattle and horses that are sleeping who are getting bitten. And the other answers are all subtly suggesting that it might be the bats who are sleeping and then biting horses while the bats are sleeping. Whereas B is very clear. They bite sleeping cattle and horses. So we know who's sleeping here, the cattle and horses. So that is sort of a subtle misplaced modifiers question. And so yeah, it just comes back to that principle of a modifier has to go next to what it modifies.